Hello, everyone. Let's get right to it. Dick Lucas here with the No Gradient Podcast. You can find it on YouTube and wherever podcasts are available. Just search No Gradient. And on YouTube, there's just a link in the show notes. Believe it or not, searching for Dick Lucas or searching for No Gradient is an absolute crapshoot on YouTube. So God bless you. Today, we're going to talk about the Facebook outage. And I'll get right into it. I want to give you, in the next 60 seconds, we're going to talk about the Facebook outage. In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to give you everything you need to know, just the facts, the highlights, so that you know at least the facts of the case. And then I'll get in and do a deeper dive. But you can listen to the first 60 seconds, boom, then turn this thing off. So I'm going to go right for it. So Facebook suffered a major outage starting on Monday, October 4th, 2021, 11:39 a.m. Eastern time, Eastern U.S. time. And then service was restored around 6:41 U.S. Eastern time. So you had about 6 hours of downtime there. This affected Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. And as far as the cause, Krebs on Security, who's very, very reputable in the space, reported from a trusted source that this was a routine update that went wrong. So your data's fine. There was no evidence that hackers did this. There's no evidence that internal employees trying to make a point did this. So far, everything points to everything. At least this one source and other indications would seem to point that this was just a regular routine update that went wrong. Okay, those are the facts. And now we're going to dive a little bit more into it. So I'm going to link to some things in the show notes. We're going to keep this episode super tight, but I'm going to link to some of the things in the show notes that really help me understand this issue. And I think in any issue, there's so much shit going on. There's so much. Anytime something happens, people are constantly trying to write a story, paint a narrative around it. There were posts about, this was probably because of the 60 Minutes interview with the whistleblower last night, talking about the who released the Facebook papers, I think they're called, about how Facebook causes mental health issues in a bunch of folks and all this other bad stuff that Facebook does. This was some internal documentation that was leaked. Anyway, there was an interview on 60 Minutes yesterday, so people were saying, the people are finally fed up, Facebook employees are revolting. There's no evidence of this. And there's also, my homie hit me up, Barstool had a report on a story that was saying, something like, all your photos and videos are gone. No, your data's fine. Your data's fine. There's no issue on that front. It's just funny to see people immediately just try to rush. I mean, that's how it is. And look at me, I'm trying to rush something out too, but I'm trying to rush something out to beat the other people trying to rush things out, given false narratives. Now, I really like to try to stick to the facts, and if possible, I always like to look at the first-party sources. So, what is Facebook saying? What have they said on the issue? And so far, they have not said much. The CTO, Mike Schroepfer, don't know how to pronounce his last name. He'll be transitioning away, I think, within a year or so. Anyway, he'll no longer be the CTO. But that was pretty much the only quote we have that Facebook acknowledged while this was going on. They've since done an apology, and I'm sure they're going to give a total rundown after this goes live. I'm sure they're going to give a total rundown on actually what happened and give their take on it. But his tweet was, sincere apologies to everyone impacted by outages of Facebook-powered services right now. We are experiencing network issues and teams are working as fast as possible to debug and restore as fast as possible. Okay, so that's what Facebook said. So there's a lot of noise around that. There's a lot of noise around here, and there's other things that we're going to talk about, but really try to, I always just try to focus on, okay, what did the first party say? Now there's other evidence on what went wrong. We don't just, the internet's an open system, so there's different there's things we can glean from it without, glean about this issue without having to rely on Facebook's what Facebook said. So Facebook, as far as I know, they have not at this point, the recording of this, have not said that this was caused by a border gateway protocol update, but Krebs on Security has a source that says that's what this was caused by, and then also Cloudflare has an excellent write-up on what they were seeing, because they run a huge content delivery network. They have servers all over the world, really help power some low-level internet things, stuff that you don't even think about. They had an excellent blog post on this. I'll link to that. I'll link to the Krebs on Security post. I'll link to Robert Graham had an excellent tweet thread on this. So I'll link to all this stuff. So like I said, anytime shit goes down, there's so much noise, but I really try to zero in on, okay, there's usually in any story, there's there's some clear thinkers I follow. I really just try to there's always one or two blog posts or posts somewhere that I'm just like, okay, these are the ones, these are the gold standard. Like this is really just giving it to you straight. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So Border Gateway Protocol update. This was, listen, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but basically from a high level, when you type in facebook.com, the routers that route your traffic all around the world that actually deliver that content to you, they convert facebook.com into an IP address. An IP address, you can think of it like a phone number on the internet. So you've probably seen them before. It's something like 192.182. whatever it's about. There's IPv4, which is shorter than IPv6, but IPv4 has a total of about 4 billion addresses. Anyway, what you need to know is that when you type in facebook.com, a machine, a router actually converts that. The DNS system actually converts that to the actual IP address, because computers speak in IP addresses. They don't speak in facebook.com. They don't speak in google.com. They don't speak in words. They speak in IP addresses, so that's how they talk to each other. So when you type that in, it gets the IP address for Facebook, and then it routes from your computer. It finds the quickest route to the data it needs to get to you. So in this case, the Facebook homepage. So you may ask yourself, okay, well, Facebook.com was down. Why don't the apps work? Facebook, the Facebook app, the Instagram app. Oh, I should say, yeah, this affected Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. Why don't those apps work? Well, those are also using this same system under the hood. Just because you don't see it, you don't have to just type in a web address in your browser for this to be affected. There's without getting too technical, these websites these apps are still making API requests that rely on this system. An API request, you make an API request to actually get data from a server to actually feed up that show in the app. So those are using the same system. So just because you're not typing in a browser doesn't mean the apps are going to work. So this affected Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp. It affected all those are their three major services, and it affected all of them. And it's important to note, Benedict Evans tweeted this out. I think he's another really clear thinker that I talk about all the time. Outside the U.S., WhatsApp is a utility. It is, people rely on it much more heavily than they do in the States, and they rely on it in much different ways than they do in the States. It's a part of life. Businesses run on top of it. It's used for obviously personal communication a lot more heavily than it is in the United States, and especially in the developing world, it's used. Businesses rely on it heavily. Even with when you travel, you can often see in developing countries, you can see things advertised with just WhatsApp phone numbers. I was in Mexico, I booked a massage, boom, WhatsApp phone number. That's how you communicate. So it's important to think about that. Okay, so let's get into the Cloudflare blog post a little bit. So they had a great post on what the Border Gateway Protocol is. Again, Robert Graham had a great tweet thread on this. I'll link to all this as well. But they also gave some information because Cloudflare runs like heavy duty backbone internet infrastructure, low level shit. They were seeing things, and they thought it was their own network that was experiencing an issue. But they obviously dug into it more and discovered that no, this was actually a Facebook issue. So what they found was, this is really interesting. When shit went down, when shit started going down, they saw that requests for Facebook and Facebook, and I don't know if it's Facebook related services too or just Facebook.com, but went up 30x. 30 times. It went up 30 times. So, and the reason for this, it's really interesting. You'd think someone will go to a website, boom, and they just go away. But no, when you go to Facebook.com and it doesn't work, what do? You refresh several times. And when you go to when WhatsApp doesn't work or when Instagram doesn't work, what do? You close out of the app, you refresh. And what happens when your friends tell you that Facebook's down? What do? You go to Facebook. I know I did. So I went to Facebook, and whoa, there's some lightning outside, and interesting. The router, the internet's out. That's interesting. I can see on my router it's red. I wonder what's going on here. Anyway, So that's a really interesting thing. 30x. So people were like kept refreshing, and that put more strain on the system. So it's a super interesting little metric that they were able to share there, that just user behavior and how that actually plays out when things aren't working. So another thing they said, Twitter, Signal, Telegram, and TikTok queries went up 1.8x. So what many would consider, these are competitors to Facebook. They basically doubled the amount of traffic to those services, which is super interesting. I just think I'm a big fan of Signal, open source, end-to-end encrypted. Big fan of the Signal app. So I just think that's a nice little tidbit there. Another thing I want to talk about here is that just a little bit more, and then we're going to wrap this up real quick. There were Krebs on Security reported that the folks that could fix the issue, the folks that actually had the necessary credentials to fix this issue, didn't have access because Facebook's because of that border gateway protocol update. Because of the issue, they didn't have actually access to fix it. So the people with physical access to the actual servers, the actual physical hardware where this update needed to take place, those people that had physical access didn't have the access that these people that weren't physically there had. They were on a different tier of access, so they couldn't actually update it, even though they were right there. So it was a little bit of an interesting little position that Facebook found themselves in. I'm sure they're going to implement processes to never let this happen again. But also, what's interesting to note is that Facebook's internal system was down. Their email was down. There are reports that key cards, and I'm always skeptical of reports. Let me say this: when I say reports, I mean reports. I'm always skeptical of. I am very skeptical of. Well, I don't want to sound like everything's fake news, but I am skeptical, especially when this happened a few hours ago. So I am always skeptical of things like that. But especially little details like this, sometimes you'll hear about it like weeks later, months later, and it's like, it turns out that actually wasn't true. Well, there were reports that even people's Facebook key cards weren't working. Because I'm sure those systems relied on Facebook's maybe internal intranet, which relied on this, which was broken by this BGP update. So they weren't able to actually get into the building where the servers were. Was another tidbit that was shared. So who knows whether that's true? I think it could be. It's not fundamental to the story, but it's certainly interesting to think about. So. And again, a lot of with this Facebook whistleblowing stuff that just came out, there's it's been coming out through the Wall Street Journal over the past couple weeks. There's a lot of speculation around this. There's been no foul play at this point. There's no evidence of foul play, and based on what Cloudflare is saying, and based on what Krebs on Security is saying, and based on those two sources, honestly, and New York Times was getting quotes from Facebook employees. It's looking like that this was not an internal protest. It doesn't look like that there were hackers that exposed or that did this, but we will see. Wow, we got some epic lightning here. But anyway, we'll see what the internet's back on. Okay, and we'll see what comes out. I think it's gonna be interesting to see what comes out of this. But I want to get it to you straight, get it to you fast, get it to you ASAP. Another thing that I like to think about: anytime there's an outage that goes down, it is interesting to think about, especially data breaches. Your Facebooks, your Googles. Twitter doesn't have as good of a record on this, but Apple, Google, Microsoft, these big, huge tech companies actually have a really good record with hackers not getting access to their systems, which I think is it's not something that you talk about. It's only something you talk about when shit actually hits the fan, but it's not something you think about when it doesn't. So anyway, I just always think that's interesting. But anyway, thanks for listening. I want to get this out ASAP. This is Dick Lucas, the No Gradient Podcast. You can find it wherever podcasts are available. Just search No Gradient. And on YouTube, there's a link to my YouTube channel in the show notes for this episode. I will not, if you're searching on YouTube, it's a little hard to find me right now. Hopefully that'll change in the future. But just go to the link in the show notes, and I'll also link to these other few stories that I mentioned, because I think they're if you want to dive deeper, super, super interesting. Okay, thank you so much. Going to get this out ASAP. Thanks for listening. And also, reach out to me at dick@nogradient.com. There are quite a few downloads on the most record for downloads in a single day on the Pandora Papers episode that I released yesterday. So I'm trying to release episodes in a more timely manner to talk about issues, very specific issues, rather than just have an episode about a range of issues and kind of a week kind of summary, like what happened the last couple weeks, what happened the past month. I want to try to get these episodes out fast. They're going to be shorter. They're going to be much more specific. Anyway, so reach out to me if you stumbled on the podcast. Dick@NoGradient. I'm curious what you think. Dick@nogradient.com. Reach out to me, and also, subscribe. I'm going to be doing this more often. And yeah, you can find me on YouTube and wherever podcasts are available. Okay, thanks so much. Latest, Gators.